Hey guys, so I have new stuff from Rush FPV that I'd like to show you. Specifically, I have 3 new products. So we have a VTX, an ESC, and a flight controller. So let's maybe start with my favorite. Let's start with the new Rush FPV Solo Tank Analog VTX. And what can I say? Well, I think this is pretty much the best looking VTX I have seen so far. It's completely encased in anodized aluminum, nicely machined aluminum. So as you can see, a red anodized bottom part here. And then on top, we have this black anodized heatsink, which is really looking quite cool. But I mean, obviously, the looks aren't the most important thing for a VTX, although I think this really looks quite cool in a build. It does also have quite a lot of power, so I'm actually not quite sure what the power rating is. I read 1000 milliwatts or 1600. After testing it, I think it's 1000 milliwatts peak power. You can use it at 25, 400, 800, and I think 1000. It just says max in the JSON file. I think it's going to maybe pump even more than 1000 in with some good cooling, but from my testing it was slightly below 1000 milliwatts. But let's power test it again in a second. Mmcx connector, so no UFL stripping here. You'll have to be a bit careful when you're building that this isn't in the way. I think these Mmcx connectors, I sort of like them and don't like them at the same time, because I think while, well, let's say they are nice because they are really robust, they aren't breaking as easily. Sorry, I have some trouble to get this stuff in focus. They aren't breaking easily, but also they always take up that bit of extra space here. And in some builds, it just can be very annoying. They aren't super flexible, so sometimes it's a bit difficult. And this thing is not super small, so you have to pay a bit of attention when you're building this. So let's quickly check out the exact size and weight of this thing. So obviously this isn't going to be light. I mean, we have some analog VTXs that are like 1.5 gram and still have 450 milliwatts. This one is 11.6 grams, so it's pretty heavy, but also, I mean, it's pretty high power. It's with 1000 milliwatts, and obviously you have all the heatsink stuff going on here, so this does add some weight. Dimensions roughly, in case you're wondering whether this will fit inside of your build, 37 millimeters length. Then we do have 24 millimeters wide width and it's almost 7 millimeters tall. So not super small, not super light, but of course very powerful. And I think probably all the heatsink stuff going on here is going to help it, especially if you don't have absolutely great airflow. If you're working on a bench, I think this thing will be absolutely fine to run without airflow for a bit because of all this area here for dissipating heat. But let's power test it. Let's see what we get if we actually put a power meter on there. All right, so what we have here, I mean, this, by the way, is the future of sub 250 freestyle. No, just kidding. This is my shot at coming up with a nice sub 250 platform, this is based on the MicroLongRange. Basically, this is a modified version. It's a true X. It's a really beefy frame with 4mm arms. This thing is super stiff. So really looking forward to test this. I have several builds to test a lot of stuff, and in one of them I integrated the Rush VTX here, and we're going to use this to basically power test now. And I'll make a separate video about these as soon as I have testing results and talk about them a little bit more. But I really think a 4-inch platform could be sort of a sweet spot to have something sub 250 still performing nice, and you can still build without too much of a headache. You can still build and get sub 250 easily without having to sort of plan your build in an Excel file. But let's not get off topic. Let's quickly get the power meter. And quick disclaimer, this thing isn't going to be super precise. This thing, I think, is a bit off. It seems to be a bit lower, the power that it displays, than it actually should. But, I mean, I don't have anything much better. And obviously we don't have airflow here, so this measurement is going to happen without airflow. So since this VTX is heat protected, it's possible that it will not reach the absolute peak power. So let's get this in here. Seems good. It's all set up and ready to go. Power, power, power. Okay. So we are at 30 milliwatts, should be 25, so it's slightly above what it should be. Basically, yeah, it's probably not super precise. It could be why it's off by 5 milliwatts. Let's crank up the power. What is that right button? Ah, no, I changed the frequency. God damn it. Alright, I'm back. Just had to reset everything because I did push the frequency button and not the power button. So, by the way, it has two buttons here on the side. Quite nice and easily accessible. And there are also some indicator lights, as you can see. Buttons are blinking. So, it should be on 400 milliwatts now. It's at roughly 300. It's getting hot. So that's interesting. That thing is cold. Nothing. It's completely at room temperature. Okay, let's crank up the power before it gets too hot. So this should be 800. It's more like 500. Starts to get warm. And maybe full power. So really reaching the limits of my power meter here. It should only go up to 1,000. Yeah, we hit... Yeah, it's at max, it's at the limit. Let's stop before we break something. So, very interesting. Let's quickly unplug the battery. So you saw it's it was a bit off when it should have done 400. Was it like 300? It was a bit above 25 milliwatts when it should have done that. So let's start with that. Slightly above 25 milliwatts when it should have done 25, was it at like 30, but that could be measurement a measurement error. At 400 it displayed something, it had an output of around 300, 800 was more like 500, was pretty off, but when I put it to max it was going above 1,000 milliwatt and above the limit of my power meter here. So safe to say it does deliver at least a watt of power, this Rush Tank Solo VTX. Alright, so I would say in conclusion, if you're looking for a VTX that is looking nice, that has very good heat dissipation properties, and you have some spare room and weight in your build, I mean, and you need a lot of power, this is probably the way to go. This is a really, really good VTX. And I think, I mean, if you look at it on this build here, the red and black motors, red and black flight controller, all in one ESC, it just does look pretty cool. Really, really nice looks. So, yeah, I really like it. Then let's move on to the ESC. It's not only an ESC, it's an entire stack. We have a flight controller here, and we have some special magic stuff here. Let's get to that in a second, what we're talking about here. So let's maybe start with the ESC. And here again, I mean, just look at this thing. Look at how beautiful this thing is. This is so clean. So obviously, all the MOSFETs, all the electronics are below these aluminum plates here. But just look at how nicely anodized they are. That thing is just incredibly pretty for an ESC. Not that it matters that much how it looks, but I think that could also, I mean, that is also for heat dissipation, It's not decoration. So as you can see, if I can get this in focus, this is, these aluminum plates are on the MOSFETs, which are getting hot, and there is, you can see there is some, hope I can get this on camera, there is some heat conducting paste on there. So while it does look nice, it's not decoration, merely decoration. This really is there to dissipate heat, all this aluminum here. Obviously adds a bit of weight, but if you're going for a build with a 30 by 30 ESC and this is a 30 by 30, probably it's going to be something big like a 70-inch. Nowadays, probably you're not gonna care about a few grams. So, where's my scale? Let's see how much this thing weighs. Right, found it. Here we go. So 17 grams. This is quite heavy, but again, it's a 30 by 30. It's 50 amps, 6S, and it's got all these heat sinks. So really some, I would say this is really heavy duty. And the ESC is not the only new thing. We have something here which I think is very interesting. It does come in this little plastic bag here, and it's a power filter. So what is it basically? I mean, what we have here is a little extra PCB, as you can see here, and you have these low ESR capacitors, and you can basically just use this. There's little holes in here to properly mount the caps. So this is very clean. And then you just basically solder it on here. I don't know, I think this is, no, it's completely, yeah. I mean, don't pay attention in which direction I'm mounting this here. This is obviously nonsense, but this is merely, so what's the polarity here? Minus, so yeah, that's this side here. It goes this way. I think this should be correct. But please check this. I'm not 100% sure if this is the correct orientation, but roughly it looks like this. Just gonna solder it here, and ta-da! You have a total of 660 microfarad of capacitors on here. But that's not everything. It's not only to mount them cleanly. There's something interesting also down here on the other side. Let me just zoom in. So, what is this? What is this? And these are basically special diodes. So what these are doing, these are not, let's say, not for classic really noise filtering, and they are for sort of for noise filtering. I mean, what they do basically, these will absorb or cut off voltage spikes. So if you have a spike in the voltage, which apparently can happen during a crash, your voltage goes up, then these will basically block the voltage spike and ensure this is not going through the ESC, and so therefore through the entire system, and really affecting or maybe damaging at least your ESC and maybe even downstream parts of your flight controller and 5-volt supply. So these will cut off voltage spikes. This will be your classical filtering, and this basically serves as a mounting board for that. So overall, really nice looking, really clean. I think Rush really sort of stepped up their game here when it comes to quality perception and overall looks of these products here. So let's look at the FC that is coming along with all of that. So this is the Blade F722 digital. So obviously an F7 processor, and again, a ton of aluminum stuff. So here, as you can see, this is basically just an aluminum protection above all the electronics of the flight controller. So this one is not for heat dissipation. If I zoom in here, and I have a hard time today getting stuff in focus. I mean, as you can see, the electronics aren't really touching this aluminum. Consider not, there's no heat conducting paste or anything. This is really just sort of decoration, the aluminum, and protection from any dirt or physical harm that could be done to your FC. I would maybe be a bit worried that over time dirt can accumulate below the aluminum plate. You're not gonna get it out, and it might get too much and short circuit something at some point. But I mean, can you remove it? Probably. I mean, this looks like you could just bend these parts here. I think you can just bend those. You zoom in. It seems to be just, oh come on, it seems to be just clamped on here. I think just clamped. There's nothing is glued or soldered. I think you can just bend these off. And then, you know what, screw it. Let me just quickly try if you can remove this aluminum thing, because I think it's important. Because if over time dirt gets in here and accumulates, you could get in trouble. Give me a second if I can remove it. And the answer is yes, easily. So as you can see, as I said, you just have to bend these little pieces of aluminum here. It's very easy to do. Be careful not to break them. I think I almost bent them too much. If you just slightly bend them, you can take this thing off, access the flight controller, and clean it if you have to do so from time to time. Another very nice thing, just come with a little USB protection here. Oh, come on. Camera is not in a good mood today. Just come with a little piece of rubber, goes into the USB. Very nice indeed. Here's the F7. Yeah, so let's quickly put the piece of aluminum back on. All right, so I've bent it back, and I think should be able to just snap this on. Yeah. Oops, does it really? No. Interesting. Okay, let's give this another try. Alright, so I just had to bend them back a little bit more. And now it looks like this does just snap in place and it's back. But honestly, there is also some glue below. They slightly glued this to the connectors here. So before I messed with it, it was secured with a bit of glue, but I think honestly, seems fine like this. Don't think this is going to come off. So, yes, you can remove the aluminum if you need to clean what's underneath. So no issue here. But let's take a closer look at all the connectors we have. And one thing you're gonna notice is, yes, lots of connectors here. Here, but also the full range of solder pads. So you can solder, you can use the connectors, you can do both. I mean, I would personally, in this case, use the connectors because it does just seem really clean. It does come with an entire bag full of connectors, so you should be good. There's one for this is the digital version. Honestly, I don't know if there's an analog version, but this one here does have a connector that is specifically for DJI HD, so for a Vista or a DJI Air unit. Let's put this the right way. So we have 10 volts, ground, TX, RX, and so TX, RX4, a signal ground, and RX2. This is what you're going to use if you use the DJI controller 2. You're probably going to get S-Bus here onto RX2. So sounds to me like it also has, I think, yeah, does have an inverter because S-Bus is going to be inverted, but I think you can also output non-inverted S-Bus through the Vista or Air unit, but I never used it, to be honest. I'm using Crossfire, which I would then put on here. So, no, wait, what is this? VCC? VCC means battery voltage for an RX. Okay, interesting. That is very interesting. Why would you have VCC? Okay, guys, I'm doing this live. I have to read the manual for a second. Okay, so here's the manual that comes in the box with the flight controller. Pretty decent manual, by the way. And as you can see, what made me wonder here is that this is VCC, which usually, if I'm not confusing something here, means battery voltage, while all these receivers here, like a Crossfire Nano, will take 5 volts. But looks like maybe it means that this one, the VCC here, is connected to the USB voltage. So it's going to output 4.5 volts. If you're connected to USB, you can power your receiver on the bench without a battery. I think this is what it means. So it just got me confused. This is not actually outputting battery voltage. This is probably going to be connected to the USB power supply if you're connected to a USB, so your receiver is power on the bench. So everything seems to be fine. In case you encounter the same issue, don't worry. You can absolutely, I think, use this for a Crossfire Nano or any other receiver. Then we do have a little supply here for LEDs, in case you want to use some LEDs. We have a connector here for a GPS. If you're using a GPS with a compass, like a BN220, for example, or BN880, I think the 880 does have a compass, then you're gonna need these, it's the wrong way again. You're gonna need these SCL and SCA connectors for the compass. If you don't have a compass, if it's like a BN180, which usually is enough, a BN180 is absolutely enough for return to home and everything we need and speed and so on, then you can remove those. You're not gonna need them. This one, that's going to the ESC and basically covered pretty much everything you need. So the only thing I wouldn't know how to connect, to be honest, is a buzzer. If I wanted an extra buzzer, stick a buzzer pad anywhere. Buzzer. Oh, by the way, here's some extra motor outputs. Pretty interesting here. You can switch from 5 volt to 3.3 volt for certain receivers. It's going to be useful that run on 3.3 volts. So you probably have to solder this before you use TX1. So there's no specific... yeah, here's the buzzer pad. So if you're using a buzzer, you're not going to use a connector. You have some buzzer pads here for your buzzer. So basically, really this thing does have you covered. So personally, I don't think there's anything I would miss on this here. It's really got everything you need on a flight controller. So let's maybe see what the entire stack weighs. Come on. So flight controller 9 grams. It's really heavy. It's really heavy. But also, I mean, 30 by 30, heavy duty stuff. You're probably going to use this on something like a 7-inch or a really heavy 5-inch freestyler. So honestly, personally, you wouldn't care too much about that weight. It's like the stack is around 30 grams without the hardware. Pretty hefty, but again, it's heavy duty stuff. And I think what I just noticed and didn't even know, look at the manual of the ESC. It does seem like there are some additional versions of it. So this is the one I have, I think, 84K, 50 amps, 60 peak, 6S. There's also a 96K, so higher output frequency. Is this so this one is Sport, this one's Super. Which one do I have here? Oh, I have the Super. I have the Super, which does 96K. And also there is a 60 amp version as well if you need those extra 10 amps here. So maybe for I don't know, I mean 60 amps per channel, you're not even gonna need this on a 7-inch unless you're building something super crazy. So probably you could run something even bigger with the super version here. So let's maybe conclude. So personally, I think this ESC here, absolute, and flight controller also absolutely beautiful. Plus with this extra power filtering, this is really something I would say is, for me, an absolute recommendation if you're building something like a 7-inch high power, really demanding setup. This is very, very nice. Plus you're going to be able to do a very clean build with all these connectors that come in here. Perfect. The VTX here, honestly, same thing basically. Heavy duty, a lot of heat dissipation, a lot of power. This will also be perfect if you're doing an analog 7-inch build, for example. But to be honest, it's also a pretty good match for this sub 250 here. I mean, it's a 4-inch, so I have a bit of margin. I can use an 11 gram, and this is basically the nice thing about this concept here. I can use an 11 gram VTX, it's still absolutely fine. And I think this one is a pretty great choice overall. So guys, I hope you found this interesting and useful. I'll link all that stuff here in the video description. I don't know if everything, all of it is going to be out already when I'm releasing this video, but I'll try to at least link it later then if all of these links aren't available yet. Alright guys, hope you found this interesting. Thanks for watching.